Hello kids, welcome to grade 6 science. This is the revision lesson for unit 1, which is cells and the cell structures. So the first topic in this unit is the plant cell. So we're going to talk about this. Before I go into the detail of what these cells are about, I just want to give you a little hierarchy of what the, let's just say if we have a human, right, that's an organism. So if you go deeper into it, we understand that a human or any organism is built upon different systems of organs, right? Organs like we've got lungs, eyes, right? These are organs, and then these systems of organ are a combination of small components known as organs itself, right? Individual organs which join together to form the bigger system, and those organs are built upon structures we call as tissues, right? And these tissues are built upon the smallest structure, the living structure we call as cells, right? So this is precisely from what we are going to start from. So we're going to have a bottom-up approach. We're going to see how cells form tissues and organs and then back up, right? So first we need to understand how cells are, what cells are, what are the common structures in different cells like plant cells or animal cells. Then we're going to compare the two, and then we're going to see how there are specialized cells doing special functions and how these cells form the tissues and the organs, right? So the first one is the plant cell. This cell is most common or general common cell for plants, which is mostly available in the leaf, the one that you're looking at, right? The major components that you look at is the first one is the external boundary that you see. It's the cell wall. The major function of this is the protection of this cell, as well as gives it a solid form, right? So it provides a solid form, it keeps it intact, it gives us a shape as well, right? So the second one, the most prominent factor, is actually the nucleus, right, which I call as the brain of the cell. It controls all the function of all the other structures in the cell, right? Now inside this cell wall, there's a cell membrane, right, which is you can say a thin film, right, that allows let me just write thin film, right, that allows exchange uh, of you can say gases, if there are gas to be exchanged, like in human beings we're breathing in oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. So in our cells, gases are also getting exchanged. Same is with plant cells, they're consuming carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen out. So there's gas exchange as well as there's nutrient exchange. So I'm just going to write it as materials, right? So exchange of material occurs through the cell membrane, right? It's a very thin film, like a bubble, a water bubble. If you see a soap bubble, right? It's a very thin film, liquidish film that holds this shape together, right? Now, what we see largely in a plant cell is a large vacuole, and this you can say that this is a storage, right, in which it stores the minerals, right, water, anything that this uh, cell is going to need, right? So that is what is like the storage of this cell, right? Right, and then we have the cytoplasm. This is the jelly-like substance uh, that holds the whole components, all the components of a cell together, right? We're going to see a three-dimensional image as well soon enough, right? But this is a two-dimensional cross-section of a cell, so you don't get to see much about the cytoplasm. It just looks like a background color over here, this light green color that you see, in which all these components are placed, right? This is cytoplasm, and it provides a stable environment for all these structures to survive, right? Then inside the cell, we see in plant cell, which is prominent in plant cell or special to the plant cell, is the chloroplast, right? This is what we call the structure that does the photosynthesis, right? And we're going to study about photosynthesis in year 8, but just for now, this is where the plants make their own food. They absorb sunlight and produce oxygen, right? And they are absorbing carbon dioxide. Now the last structure over here is the mitochondrion, right, or mitochondria, right? This structure, this reddish one, this is the powerhouse of the cell, right? And what it does, that it takes up some of the stored energy over here, and burns it up and provides energy to all other components like chloroplast and the nucleus to do their job, right? So it's a powerhouse. It does the respiration process, right? While the chloroplast does the photosynthesis. Unfortunately, animals do not have chloroplast, so they only do respiration because of the presence of mitochondria. While in plants you see chloroplast as well. That is why plants do photosynthesis in the day, and at night they are respiring as well, right? Because there is no sunlight, so they have to burn some of the energy to survive. So the mitochondria are in action at night, and during day, chloroplasts are more functional. Okay. Now this is the basic idea of what are the major components of a plant cell. Now you have your book with you guys, so you just need to read through all these components that you have discussed in the class as well, right? Just read through this and you'll be good to go, right? The next topic is the animal cell, right? Now in the animal cell, as I said, the structures are similar, except what is the major difference between the animal cell and the plant cell is a cell wall, right? You don't see a cell wall in animal cells. Your cell actually starts from the cell membrane itself, right? It's a membrane that holds it together. Although the membrane, unlike the plant cell, is slightly different, but the function is mainly the same, right? So it allows the exchange of material through and in and out of the cell, right, or between the cells. And a nucleus again doing the same function, that is the brain of the cell. Then the mitochondria is there, or mitochondrion, which does the which provides the power to all these components to do their job. And unlike plant cell, which has a large vacuole, in animal cell we have non-permanent, right? Non-permanent vacuoles. And why I'm saying non-permanent vacuoles, because these vacuoles form and disappear depending upon when the cell has consumed its storage and when it is getting a storage, right? So let's just say if you eat some food and you're drinking some water, your cells will start forming these small vacuoles inside the cytoplasm, right? I missed the cytoplasm, this yellow jelly-like substance, right? So the cytoplasm. So you will start to see that these vacuoles are starting to form up, and they will increase in size if you eat, right? That is a storage. And once, while you're working, you don't eat all day long, right? So while you're working, you're consuming energy, so the mitochondrion is absorbing the food from here and releasing CO2 out into the air while absorbing oxygen to consume this, right? So you will see that these vacuoles will shrink in size, and a point will come that they will disappear once they have consumed all of their storage, right? So that's why they are non-permanent. So they form when you eat food, and when you have storage of water and food in your body, and once you're consuming that, and that is why you feel hungry as well. Once these vacuoles are gone, the nucleus provides the signal that now the cell requires more storage or more food to operate, so it generates a signal to your brain to eat more, right? So this is the general difference between the plant and the animal cell. Let's compare these two, right? So if we compare the animal cell and the plant cell, the cytoplasm is common, the nucleus is common, the cell membrane is common, and the mitochondrion is common, right? What is the difference? What you can say that the plant cell has and the animal cell doesn't have, that would be the cell wall, right? And a permanent vacuole. That means I told you that these are non-permanent vacuoles, so they may or may not exist depending upon the state of the cell, whether it has consumed all of its storage or not. But for the plant cell, this is a permanent one, right? Why? It always remains filled. This is also known as a sap vacuole, right? Why is that so? Reason being, whenever you cut a plant leaf or branch of a plant, you see white liquid coming out of the the stem, and that is what we call as a sap, right? That whitish liquid coming out of it. So this is exactly what's stored into the plant. So the sap is always filled, unlike the animal cell, right? And then they have chloroplasts giving them the greenish color. That's why the plants have greenish leaves and greenish color, green tone, right? Because of the chloroplast. Now this is the three-dimensional image of the plant and the animal cell. You were looking at the flatter images, but now this is a three-dimensional component-wise image where you see that this is the nucleus, right? This is the cell wall, which you see as a very hard structure. Uh, Compared to that, over here you see that animal cell is more roundish in nature or more spherical like a ball, right? This is more like a cube, right? And then this is the mitochondrion, the nucleus. This is what we call as the ribosome or nucleolus, right? Which covers or protects the nucleus as well, right? And allows it to do its functions. But again, these are some advanced structures that you're going to study in next classes, right? Not at your level currently. So just to give you an idea, perspective of what it looks like, the vacuole, right? It's like a big, bulge of water and all the sap that is inside it, right? And these are the chloroplasts that you see, right? So these are called Golgis, but we're not going to study those at your level, right? There, as I said, these are a bit more advanced pictures. This is what is supposed to be learned at your level for now, right? And if you want to learn more about these, then you can go, onto the internet and study what these additional structures you're looking at are, right? And what's their function, right? But those are not required for the examination or for your assessment, right? So I'm just going to skip that for now. Okay, now moving on, we studied about specialized cells in the class, right? So specialized cells, the first one we looked at was a red blood cell, right? Now this is a much more complicated image, just for the sake of your understanding and for the sake of interest, that the blood that in our body, right, is composed of not just these red like liquid, but that red liquid is composed of several components. The most prominent out of which is the red component, right? We call the RBCs, the red blood cells, right? And they have a very specialized function. They're a specialized cell. Those red blood cells are carried in plasma. That is why our blood is liquidish, right? They also contain the white blood cells that fight the infection, and the platelets, right? That have other functions. There are more structures and more components inside the plasma. But for your level, I'm just going to talk about the white blood cell and the RBCs. Although the WBCs are not in your book and not to be discussed because this is in grade 7 that we're going to discuss, right? But for the RBC, this is the oxygen carrier, right? And how does it carry oxygen? Because I told you that specialized cells have special functions, and to do their special functions, their cells are designed to be special. So this RBC cell does not have a nucleus, right? And why does that? Because nucleus carries, occupies space and requires mitochondrion to do its function. And this is just a carrier cell, so it is not going to have a nucleus in there, right? It doesn't have any special function to do. Also, it doesn't have vacuoles, because again that will occupy space and will have less storage for oxygen. We want most of the oxygen to be stored in one cell of these, right? One of these. And that's why we see that this has no other structures. It just has hemoglobin, right? Which is a large biological molecule that has the capacity to carry oxygen with it, right? That's what the RBC is containing, other than the nucleus and the vacuole or the mitochondrion, right? Not even mitochondrion is there, and the reason for the absence of mitochondrion is quite different from these two, because mitochondrion is not a very large structure, right? Unlike nucleus or the vacuole that is going to occupy space, mitochondrion is small. But why we don't have mitochondrion? Because the mitochondrion consume oxygen. So if the red blood cell is going to have the mitochondrion, then it will consume the oxygen that it is carrying along the way. That is why we don't even see mitochondrion in there. You only see cytoplasm and a new structure, which is hemoglobin, a biological molecule that has the capacity to hold oxygen while it transports it to rest of the body, to rest of the cells in the body, to do its respiration or its functions, right? Now this is the microscopic image of the red blood cell. Unfortunately, we were not able to make a slide in the lab, but I just took an image from the internet, that if we just take our blood sample, right, a human blood sample, and put it on a slide and look at in the microscope, we're just going to see this, right? And you can see that there's a bulge in between, right? That's why they're more transparent in the middle and darker at the outer edges. So this is like, if I made a side view, then this is something like this, right? So there's a bulge in between in this, and on the sides it is more thicker, right? It's like a disc, right? You can see over here there's a three-dimensional image, right? So this is the indent or the bulge, right? So This is what you're going to look at in the microscope. You see no structures like a nucleus, right? If you remember, in the lab I showed you several samples in which you were able to distinctly see small circular nucleus inside the cell, right? So this is not having any nucleus or any other structure. It's just a plain transparent cell. The reason being it's only containing hemoglobin for the carrier of oxygen, right? Okay, the next specialized cell we discussed was the cilia, right? A ciliated cell. Now, what this ciliated cell is, it is a cell, right, which has the small hair-like structure we call cilia, right? And what's the function of this cilia? That the mucus that is produced in our lungs or in our nasal cavity or in our throat is actually moved around by these cilia, right? It moves that around so that in case if any dust particle or any foreign particle is caught in our nose, it will move it out using the mucus, right? That's why when we get infection, chest infection or throat infection, we actually we get some dense mucus forming, right, and greenish mucus being formed, and we get a running nose, liquidy nose, and that is why, because this mucus is trying to transport that foreign material out of our body using these ciliated cells. Now, when I said that cells join together to form tissue, over here you're looking at a more at a tissue, right? This is the tissue from the nasal cavity or from your throat, where you see the ciliated cells working together with goblet cells, which are producing the mucus, and the basal cells, which are holding these together, right, and allowing them to do their function. So this is what you call as a tissue, right? Cells joining together to form a bigger structure, right? If we just take about the ciliated cell, this would be ciliated tissue, but this is a more complex tissue. It is closer to organ because you see three different types of cell together, but they're of the same category, doing the same job, right? They're working together to do one job, and that is creating mucus and removing any foreign objects from your body, right? What is very specific about this, that you don't see any other than you see a nucleus and you see mitochondrion in there, right? But you don't see a vacuole or other things in this cell, because it's specialized cell. It is supposed to do one function, and that is creating mucus, and that is only done by goblet cell. The ciliated cell itself doesn't have any mucus production. It just moves it around, right? It's designed, and for that you see the nuclei are bigger than the basal cells, right? Because it's got a function, so it needs to control that function. Okay. Lastly, in animal cells, there's another specialized cell we call the neuron, right? And the neuron is basically, you can say, the brain cell, right? In short, brain cell or the cells or the sensory cell, right? And the function of this cell is to conduct electrical signals through the body, right? And I told you in class that our brain and our spinal cord works on electrical impulses to move our muscles, right? To move our body and to do its functions. So basically, these are the dendrites, right? The branches. This is the nucleus that's I've marked, right? And this is the axiom, right? Again, these are the dendrites, right, the lower, and then they connect to each other using to conduct electrical impulses. These are conductive cells, right? That is why we also get electrocuted, because our nervous system actually works on electricity, right? So we do have conductive capacity in our body. That is why we have to be very safe from electrical hazards, because we are conductive in nature, right? So the general function, it's a specialized cell. The general function is to conduct electrical signals or to do the sensing and relaying signals from brain to the body and from the body back to the brain, depending upon what type of version is there. Now, during the workbook solution, you guys were not able to identify this as a neuron, right? And that's the problem, that the book was not, as I said, some of the things are not available in the book. That is why I put these revision lessons, right? And discuss things, that is that there are several types of cells, right? This is the general neuro cell that we draw, but there are other shapes of the neuron cells, right? Which is the unipolar, the bipolar, the multipolar, and the pseudopolar neuron, which is this one, right? And we'll see this in a question, right? I'll solve the workbook for you as well for unit 1, that this is also a neuron, but you guys were not able to detect this because this didn't look like a normal neuron which was drawn in your book, right? So just giving you a basic idea. Now we're going to look at some specialized uh, plant cells, right? And these plant cells are specialized or designed to do specific functions. The first one we're going to look at is the root hair, right? Root hair cell. And what does this cell does that it is designed to absorb water and nutrients from the ground. It is again the root, right? This is the very tiny little hair that you see, those tiny little hair, not the bigger roots that you look at, right? These are thin uh, structures which usually if you pull out a plant, these are actually broken and you barely get to see these, right? If you very carefully remove a small little a plantling which is like a freshly growing plant, then you remove that plant safely without pulling it out, just bit by bit, dip it in water and shake the mud off without pulling it out, then you'll see this small tiny little hair which we call as a root hair, right? And what this root hair does is that you see that it's a tissue, right? The root tissue which is there. You see that a nucleus is trying to grow an extension, a bulge out of this cell, which turns into a root hair itself, right? And over time, you see that the cell has changed its function from being a basic root into a very specialized cell, which has a larger vacuole to absorb water and do its function, right? The other structures are the same, that the cytoplasm is there, the cell wall is there, there's a large vacuole, the cell membrane, it has a nucleus. But it doesn't have chloroplast. Why? Because the roots are underground, so they don't get sunlight, so they don't require the presence of chloroplast to do photosynthesis, because they cannot do photosynthesis because of absence of light, right? And secondly, they do not even have mitochondrion. They do have mitochondrion, but once it prolongs into a larger root cell, root hair, it doesn't have the mitochondria. These are the mitochondria, right? And they need it to grow this into a larger structure. But once it's gone, as I said, the cell keeps changing its structures. So this is how it grows, right? Now I'm going to show you an image how water, I mean, this is the root hair cell growing into the soil, right? Soil particles. It is absorbing the humidity, stored in these soil particles, as well as the nutrients. Mainly, you've got water, magnesium, and nitrates that the plants need to grow. This is for this is the very reason the magnesium is for the green color that is there in the plant, the green coloration. The nitrate is required for the growth of the plant, and generally the water is required to do photosynthesis and produce oxygen, and definitely for the survival of the plant, right? Now this is just the basic understanding of this. You don't need to memorize these things, okay? Now the second one is the mesophyll cell, or the cell responsible for doing photosynthesis, right? Now, if you look at this, this is basically an organ, right? It's a leaf, right? And this is a small portion of a leaf that we're using. Over here, you see this layer cells, one type of cells working to join together. We call this as tissue, right? And I told you that when several tissues join together, you see this another layer that are different from this, and the bottom and the top layers are different, right? You see that different types of cells, when they're working together, they form an organ, right? When they form tissues of their own. So this is the spongy mesophyll layer that does little bit of photosynthesis. And then we have the palisade cell, that the first cell we looked at, right? The plant cell, the general plant cell we talk about is this one, right? So this is the main structure, how they work together. The sunlight comes in, it gets entrapped in by these chloroplasts, and then it produces glucose, which is required for the cell, and it gets stored into the vacuole, right? And water and other things are transported by other cells. This is just a cross section of a leaf, right? Okay, now moving into the final topic, which is cells, tissues, and organs, right? So as I said, that different cells work together forming tissues, and different tissues join together to form the organ. As you can see over here, you have this xylem, right? I discussed in the class, and the phloem, right? This carries the nutrients in plant, and the xylem carries water in plants. Now you can see that each one over here, this is one cell, but after a while, once they grow, they open up into each other. forming a larger tissue, larger structure of the combination of cells. So this is one type of cell joining together, forming a big tube that is carrying water in the plants, right? This is what we call as a xylem cell and xylem structure, right? They join together. Over here in the micrograph, these are the xylem cells you're looking at, right? The larger tubes, right? This is a cross section of a stem, so you can see how these xylem cells are working. These are the mesophyll cells, the spongy ones, right? And then you have the phloem cells, which are closer to these, right? These colored ones, right? Uh, the smaller tubes, right? Thin tubes. These are the phloem cells which carry the nutrients and deliver. And these, the white ones, are actually the normal regular cells that you look at, right? Okay. Just giving an idea that how different combinations of cells are, I mean, one type of cell forming a tissue and several types of cells working together, like several types of tissues working together forming one organ. This is the organ what we call as the stem, right? Moving further, if we talk about human beings, then we have the connective tissues, right? The cells, small cells that join different portions of our body together. The cartilaginous tissues, right? Then we have the nervous tissue, which is like very common. The bone tissues, how the bone cells join together. Then the blood, I told you it is a combination of different cells, right? Then the epithelial tissues, right? And then finally, then the muscle tissues we do have, right? Okay, and the epithelial tissue is basically the skin, right? This is how your skin looks like, right? Okay, and one reason that I forgot to talk about was the cell wall. That in animals, that is why we have softer skin, unlike plants which have harder tops. Reason being, they have cell wall, we have cell membrane. That's why we have softer skins. Now, if you look at this is the micrograph of the epithelial cells, right? The skin cell, right? They look, and over here you can see these darkish structures. These are the nuclei, right? Now, if we look at the hierarchy, we have, let's say, specialized cells of the muscles. Those join together to form muscle tissues, right? We call as, like, generally we call those muscles, and those muscles join together to form organs. In this case, we're talking about a heart, and then heart, along with all the the vessels and all its other organs joined together, forms the circulatory system, and the circulatory system distributes all it is the delivery system in our body that transports oxygen, water, and nutrients in the body. So it transports all the material inside the body through the circulatory system, forming the big organism, right? Working with other systems like the respiratory system, the digestive system. When all these systems join together, they form the organism, which is the human in this case, right? The similar is in the case of the plants, that you see plant cells forming tissues, forming an organ, and we have a system of organ, you call it a branch, right? And then the branches along with the roots and the stem join together to form the organism, which we call as a complete plant, right? There is another example of the animal group, right, in which you see cells, again the circulatory system, forming up to the horse, right? Or a pony, whatever it is, I don't know, right? Okay. Now moving into the workbook, right? Now over here, a lot of kids, I saw that we're having trouble solving this. I'm just gonna solve this in a quick manner, so that if you have any incorrections, you may just be able to correct your stuff, right? Okay, the first is the outer structure. This was the cell wall, right? This is the cell membrane. This is the cytoplasm. This is the nucleus. Then we have sap vacuole, mitochondrion, and then we have the chloroplast. Okay, this was very fairly easy. It was drawn in the book, and also these were there. The hints were already there, so you just had to solve it a little bit, right? Okay, next question. In this exercise, you will practice making and labeling a clear, simple diagram. Marcus makes a drawing of a plant cell, right? This is what Marcus has drawn. Marcus' teacher gives him a list of 3 things that he needs to do to improve his drawing, right? He drew this, and the teacher gave him 3 directions to improve this. Make sure that each label line touches the structure, which you see that the chloroplast is not touching the chloroplast. There's a problem there, right? Take care that to get the shapes and the proportions correct. Now that is also the problem. You look at the nucleus, this and this, you cannot identify which one's which, right? They all look the same, they all have the same size, which on the contrary, if you look at the proper one, you see that the nucleus is bigger, the chloroplast is a little smaller, and mitochondria are the smallest, right? So that's not fairly visible in this one. And the third one, do not shade or color your drawing. So he shaded the cell wall. That makes it difficult to see whether it's a structure or complete structure, what it is. So the cell membrane is now hidden over here, right? So this is the problem that he has done. Now the next part of the question is, write down two more ways that the Marcus can improve his labeling. I told you one way is that to label uh, parts only on one side, right? And the example is like in part 2 that I've pre-solved for you people, because this actually was going to take a lot of time to draw and label, right? So I drew this, that it's better to label all the parts on one side, makes it easier to understand, right? Doesn't make it any confusing, right? And the second thing that he can do, now remember, you're not supposed to use these 3 points. These are out of the box because the teacher has already given him these 3 points. It's a challenge, so you have to think what else he can do to make his drawing better, right? And that would be one thing that we discussed, that labeling should be on one side. Secondly, you can say that multiple structures can be modeled together, right? One thing. And you can come up with any other label. As I said, these are open-ended questions, so I'll accept any logical answer at this point, right? I can give you a list of answers, but that would be unfair, that you'll start copying my work, right? So you can come up with any answer. I'll just check it out whether you're right or wrong, but most probably you'll be right, because if you did not use those 3 points and you gave your own idea, then it's acceptable. Okay, so there's no fixed answer for this question. And in science you will be having such questions which would be open-ended, so there won't be any fixed answer to that question. Okay, now in this exercise, this is 1.1c. You will practice making comparisons. You will also think about why plant cells are not all the same. The diagram shows 2 plant cells, plant cell A and plant cell B, right? Now there's a clear difference between the two, right? Okay, describe 3 differences between plant cell A and B, right? The first difference has been started for you, right? This is how you're supposed to write, right? Plant cell A has we can say large vacuole, right? Vacuole, sorry, I missed the O. So you can see there's a clear difference between the two, but the plant cell B has a smaller one, right? Okay, the second one, you have to write the same way, right? Plant cell A has chloroplast, but plant cell B doesn't, right? It doesn't have chloroplast, as you can see, right? Okay. Third difference, right? That could be the size and the shape, right? Plant cell A is rectangular, while plant cell B is not rectangular, or you can say irregular, right? Or you can come up with the idea that this is hexagonal, right? If you just measure the size 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 faces, so we call it hexagonal, right? Hexagon or hexagonal in shape, right? Suggest which cell comes from the leaf, and the answer is very simple, that the plant cell A comes from the leaf, right? Also, a lot of people wrote the answer, but remember, I will deduct marks in the assessment if you do not read the question properly, right? It's the reading that is going to give you a hard time, not the writing, right? So explain your suggestion. So you also have to give the reason why you're saying this, right? And because it contains chloroplast, and because the chloroplast does the photosynthesis, so that's why it needs to be up in the plant cell to do its function, right? Because this appears to be a root cell for me, right? It would be a root center, not the root hair, but the root cell. Keep in mind, root hair cell has a hair coming out of it, but the general root cells, they look like these. Okay, okay. Animal cells. Now this is topic 1.2. The first one is how to use a microscope. Some of the things that biologists study are very small. Answering these questions will help you to become confident in using a microscope to see very small things, right? The diagram shows a microscope. Now this is going to be a labeling exercise, so I'm just going to label it in numbers. So I'm going to that's a big one right here. Let's just get this. So this is number 1. I'm going to call it 1. Number 2, number 3, 4, 5. This is 6. This is 7, and this is now going to be 8, right? Okay. Now I'm just going to number them, right? So number 8 is the this is sorry. Yeah, there's a mirror. My bad. This is number 7, right? This is number 8. This is number 1, the eyepiece on the top, right? The high power objective I told you is the longer one, so this is going to be number 5. The low power is number 4. Medium is number 6, right? The one I marked from the back. Coarse focusing knob is number 2, and the fine focusing knob is number 3. I hope I've got all of them right. Okay, so this is a very fairly simple labeling that could have been done. I've discussed this labeling in lab as well. I've showed you the microscope. Okay. Okay, Zara is using a microscope to look at some animal cells on a slide. She knows that there are animal cells on the slide, but she, when looks through the microscope, cannot see any cells, right? List 3 possible reasons why she cannot see. Number 1, mirror is not aligned, right? Because remember, you're supposed to relate questions whenever there's one problem like this. So remember, the similar object is to be used. So she's using a mirror microscope, right? So we're going to talk about mirror and not the light source. In lab, the one we're using has a tungsten lab. I told you that's a more professional microscope that we're using, right? The one this is for the students to be used, right? The mirror one. So we're going to talk about this one, right? The mirror is not aligned, right? Probably since there is no light coming in, right? Secondly, lens is not focused, right? She did not focus it up. Definitely that she's not going to see anything. Or number 3, slide is not placed correctly. I mean, probably she did not place the slide correctly. Let's say if this is the sample area, and she placed the on a stage on one side, and this is the center, right? The center piece where the light is going to be, where the focus is going to be. So obviously if the animal cells are right here, how can you see this, right? So that's the problem. Okay, so then you have to give advices how to correct these. Remember, all the reasons that you have given, you have to fix them as well, right? I'm not going to give you the answers because these are very simple, fairly simple answers, so you can write the answers in your own way. As I said, again, open-ended question, so any logical answer would be correct, right? So I'm not going to write any answers for you. You can just consider any answer that you think is logically correct, right? Okay, then the diagram shows a red blood cell, right? Complete the sentences. Choose words from this list, right? You can use each word once, more than once, or not at all, right? Okay. Red blood cells contain a substance called hemoglobin, right? This helps them to carry oxygen, right? We talked about this in the red blood cell section, right? The red blood cells are smaller than most cells. This helps them to squeeze through small blood vessels called capillaries, right? Now if you had studied the book, then this was stated in the book, right? Now again, I told you that reading is going to be your only task at home, right? Other than that, I'm not going to give you any R's or anything. You just need to read through the text that is there, okay? Okay. Moving further, this is a root hair cell, right? We've also discussed it in class as well as in the book, right? Name this cell. So it is the root hair cell. Okay. Explain how can tell this is a plant cell and not an animal cell, right? And that is very fairly visible, right? Presence of cell wall. Okay. Describe the function of this cell. Since it's a root hair cell, you have identified it absorbs water and minerals, right? And I can accept minimalistic answers as long as I said, they're logically correct, okay? Explain how this cell is adapted for its functions. Extruded hair like growth and larger vacuole, right? Even large than the normal ones that we see. Now remember, when there's a single question number, like this is question number 2, and then these are subsequent parts. So you don't need to repeat your answers to explain something. You can rely on your previous statement and move on, right? If you have explained it properly, as I said, explain how this cell is adapted. You don't have to write this, that for absorbing water and minerals this has an extrusion and a large vacuole, right? You don't need to write that, because you can build upon the previous answer. But remember, until unless it's in the same question, right, and it's got subparts, if they're different questions, then you have to answer properly, okay? Then you cannot use this shortcut. Okay, next one. Question number 3. The diagram shows two specialized cells. The design and draw table you can use to compare the structures of these two cells, then complete your table. Okay. Now, if you compare this, right, one is an animal cell, one is a plant cell, that is fairly visible because this doesn't have a cell membrane, oh sorry, the cell wall, and this one has a cell wall. So this is a plant cell, this is generally a mesophyll cell, and this is a ciliated cell, which is in the nasal cavity or in the lungs. So it is fairly visible that it's an animal cell versus a plant cell. So how you can compare these two, right? You can make plant cell A, plant cell B, what they have, their commonalities. Like there were several tables made by kids, and I checked them, most of them as correct, because as I said, these are open-ended questions. This is science, this is not fixed that you have to follow my instructions entirely. You can think of your own ways to tackle things, as long as you're logically correct, right? Since this is science, so the logic matters, not what I'm going to dictate it to you, right? So this is science, you have to explore it yourself. So there's several ways. One table that I like the most by few kids, right? Some of the kids made that, was that it was like animal cell, right? Commonalities, and then there was a plant cell, or they one kid also did this, that they named it as A and B, and they marked it as A and B and the commonalities between them, and the differences were there, right? Their specialized functions were here and the common ones here, right? For example, the common is cell membrane, right? That was there for both, it's available in both. The nucleus is there, right? And the cytoplasm, right? That's the commonalities, and the differences are their own individual ones, that this one has chloroplast, right? And large vacuole, and then we see mitochondrion, right? And this, in this we see cilia, the hair, right? And absence of all of that, you can say this absence of mitochondrion, chloroplast, and vacuole, right? I mean, in general. So this was the difference. I like this table the most, but I saw another table which was like a simple one, right? In which there was the animal and the plant cell, and they just simply stated the differences. That was also correct, right? So I do not consider any valid response as incorrect, just because it doesn't feel adjust to my taste, okay? And my taste doesn't matter, as long as logically correct. I'm just gonna mark it as correct, okay? All right. So, in your own words, explain how the structure of each cell is adapted for its function, right? Now, in the ciliated cell, they have got cilia that move the mucus, right? That's why it is adapted. Doesn't have mitochondrion, because it's, it doesn't have large vacuoles or other structures, because it's designed to do only one thing, which is to move mucus, right? The hair cell is the actual function. For the plant cell, you see there's a lot of chloroplast, and that is for doing its photosynthesis, okay? So that's precisely what you're supposed to be discussing about this. Other than that, as I said, open-ended, you can discuss whatever you wish to, like, right? Okay. Now, this was the table in which you have to join things, right? This is the problem that I was talking about while we were discussing neuron. Now, this is also a type of neuron, the one which is not drawn in the book, but it was there in your workbook. So this was a cell, right? And then, well, different cells, you can see these are nuclei. When these different cells join together, they're forming one tissue. And when these tissues join together, they form an organ. And finally, these organs join together, forming a system of organs, right? All right. Okay, moving on. Now, this was the problem where majority of the class was having the problem. If you studied the computer science stage before stage 7, you will have learned about the organ system in the body, right? You guys have studied most of these systems in science, right? The digestive system and the respiratory, circulatory, nervous systems, just the introductions, not in detail. So we're just going to write the system and some of its organs, right? The function is there. So the function is transporting substances around the body. That would be circulatory system, even I just discussed this a moment ago, right? And remember, over here, a lot of kids were having this trouble. They did not look at this word. It says organs, right? It's an S, it's a plural. So it's not a single thing that you have to write. Kids who wrote only one organ over here, I did not accept that, right? Because it's a plural. So as I said, you will have to look at the question, what it is asking, and answer accordingly, right? So if you make a reading error like this, you will lose marks. So don't come crying to me that I've deducted your marks because you did not read the question properly, right? I'm not going to read the questions for you. So you have to keep a very keen eye what the question is stating. So small silly mistakes like these are going to make you lose marks, right? So please read questions very carefully before you answer. So in the circulatory system, we've got heart as an organ, and then you can say veins or arteries. I mean, just two, right? At least two, because it's a plural. One is not going to cut it. Two or more would be fine. Okay, breaking down food and absorbing, that would be digestive system, right? And in that case, we have stomach, esophagus, right? Intestines. So I'm just going to go with intestines, right? Stomach. Okay. Taking oxygen in and getting rid of carbon dioxide, that's the respiratory system. And for that, we have lungs, we have nose, right? That's also like all of them. I'm just going to write two. Helping different parts of body to communicate with one another, and that would be the nervous system, right? And in the nervous system, there's brain and spinal cord, right? Now remember, some of you wrote the word nerve. Now nerve is a cell, not an organ. Although I did check that, put a tick there because I didn't want to put so many crosses at the first go. I did put some crosses on your workbook because I told you that I'll be very harsh at checking your workbooks. So please, consider the fact that it's asking for an organ, not a cell. Nerve is a cell, not an organ, right? So keep the clear difference between these two. Okay. Okay, the last topic of the this one is was this Hydra question, right? And this was a fun question, and we discussed that even one of my response was not accurate enough because one of the student corrected me. And as I said, this is science, so it's open-ended. So even you guys can have a better observation than me as long as you're looking keenly about it, right? So I missed one point out of this context while reading through this, right? So I'm just gonna fix that up, right? In this challenging task, you will practice finding relevant information in the text and diagrams. You will then apply this information and your knowledge of cells, tissues, and organs to answer questions. Hydra is a tiny animal that lives in the freshwater ponds. It has tentacles that it uses to catch smaller animals. Now, this is what I'm going to highlight. This is exactly what the student has corrected for me, and I'm very thankful. Right? Okay. So the tentacles that it uses to catch even smaller animals, right? Which it pushes into its mouth, right? And the mouth opens up into the cavity where the digestion takes place, right? So which is the digestive cavity, the tentacle, and the mouth. So I'm just highlighting these three articles for later use, right? Okay. The body of the hydra is made up of two layers of cells, right? So the diagram shows what hydra looks like if you can cut it up in two. So they sliced it from side. It's a sideway look, okay? And how it's look like in the microscope. All right. Now for the question, Hydra has some specialized cells called sting cells to help it catch food. These cells contain tiny coiled threads. When the prey animal touches the trigger on the cell, the thread shoots out and wraps around the prey, and then these threads may have poisonous chemicals on them which kill the prey. And then it moves it up into, the tentacle is going to move it into the mouth and to the cavity into the digestion process, right? Okay, the diagram shows the skin cell before and after it has triggered. Okay, now the first question. All right. For each of these parts of hydra, decide whether it is a cell, tissue, or an organ. So the inner layer of cell, so the word layer of cells already tells you that it's talking about a tissue. Again, the outer layer of cells, again we call it a tissue, right? Okay. Uh, Sting cell, because it's just single cell, we're going to call it a cell. A tentacle is a combination of the inner and the outer cell, so it's going to be an organ, right? Okay. Now this is the question. Some of us, or majority of us, got wrong, and few kids got it right, including me. I got it wrong, right? Because I didn't read the text properly. So in humans, there are several different organs that make up the digestive system. Does Hydra have a digestive system? Explain your answer. Now let's go back to the diagram, right? Over here, I just marked these three, and this was, as I said, highlighted by the student, right? Because I only discussed the idea that it has a digestive cavity, it doesn't have intestines and other all those parts, so it is probably just an organ and not a system of organs, so we don't call it a digestive system. But the student identified that, sir, it does have a tentacle with which it is catching the prey and uses the tentacle to put it through the mouth, and definitely the mouth is allowing the food to go into the digestive cavity. So there are three organs that are working together to do the digestive work, right? So it would be a digestive system. So I truly now agree that yes, the student is right, and some of us are wrong that this is just an organ. It is a digestive system, and this is precisely, you have to explain digestive system, because tentacles, mouth, and digestive cavity are working together. Please don't mind my writing, I'm using the tablet at a high speed, so wiggles a lot, right? It's very slippery. So working together, I'll try to go a little slower. Okay, working together to do a single function, right? And that's the single function. When different organs join together doing one job only, that is when we call it a system of organs. In this case, we call it a digestive system, right? And if there's only one organ doing one function for the whole idea, that is when we call it a single organ system, or an organ only, right? Okay, let's three features of the sting cell that you would expect to find in most animal cells, right? So what do you see over here, which is common to the animal cell? Number one, the cell membrane. Number two, nucleus. Number three, cytoplasm, right? So these are the three that we're going to identify, which is nucleus, cytoplasm, and finally we had the cell membrane. Okay, explain how could you tell from the diagram that the sting cell is an animal cell and not a plant cell, and that was fairly visible that doesn't have a cell membrane. Oh, doesn't have a cell wall, right? It doesn't have one, so that's, or chloroplast. We can identify other structures depending upon the number of marks, right? If it were 2 marks, then this would only get you 1 mark because I just identified one. So if it were 2 marks, I will have to also lacks large vacuole, right? So then you have to identify at least 2 points. So a lot of kids were asking, sir, how much should we write? How many points we need to write? That depends upon the marking scheme, which you'll experience the first time in the assessment. Because as I said, I'll guide you guys through the first assessment and then help you, understand how the grading system works. Afterwards, I'm not going to be any help at all because you'll have to explore science on your own. I'm just going to be a facilitator for you people. Okay. All right. A sting cell is specialized cell. In your own words, explain how a sting cell is adapted. Although there were a lot of lines, usually for these many lines, the marking criteria is 3 marks or 4 marks. So that means you have to get three distinct points, right? So number one, specialized, because why is it specialized cell? Because doesn't have common animal cell structures, right? For example, it doesn't have mitochondria, right? That's one, right? This is one score. It also lacks, what does it lack compared to other, is presence of vacuoles. It doesn't have any vacuoles at all, right? You can write that animal cells do, I told you, have non-permanent, but they do have vacuoles at times. Okay. Number three, specific defense mechanism, we call it, right? Defense mechanism, or the hunting mechanism that is there, which is that you can say the sting threat, right? which is not there in a regular animal cell. Sting, sorry, thread, right? Which is not there. So as I said, depends upon the marks how much you need to discuss, but obviously they'll give you that much information in the question, right? They've already told you that it's got a sting cell, it's got a trigger mechanism, right? You can, if there were 4 marks, then you can write this trigger mechanism as well. The thread is one thing, right? And then it has a nucleus, and it has a very unique odd shape which has a trigger as well. So as I said, you can identify nearly 5 distinct points which are not common to a regular animal cell. Okay, now that's all for your unit 1 revision. If you got any troubles, you may leave a comment or you can text me on the WhatsApp and I'll be able to respond. Thank you so much for your time. I'm hoping for a very good assessment from you people. Good luck for your assessment. Thank you.